You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to Whistleblower Nation here on Revolution Radio. And I'm your host, Ella. What is a whistleblower? A whistleblower is a person who makes public disclosures of wrongdoing, corruption, and crime. These courageous people often suffer retaliatory actions because of their disclosures. I'm here to celebrate these people and give them a platform because shining a light on wrongdoing wherever it occurs plays an important role in keeping our society peaceful, free, and just. So everybody, this is Susan Lindauer. That's who I have with me. She's an American anti-war activist and former U.S. congressional staffer who was charged with, actually you were indicted, acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign government and violating U.S. financial sanctions.
Which was a total lie.
I know. We'll get to that. Financial sanctions during the run-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq. She was incarcerated in 2005 and released the next year after two judges ruled her mentally unfit to stand trial. The government dropped the prosecution in 2009. In 2010, Lindauer published a book about her experiences. Since 2011, Lindauer has appeared frequently on television and in print and is a U.S. government critic. Lindauer is the daughter of John Howard Lindauer II, a newspaper publisher and former Republican nominee for the governor of Alaska. Lindauer attended East Anchorage High School in Anchorage, Alaska, where she was an honor student and was in school plays. She graduated from Smith College in 1985, then earned a master's degree in public policy from the London School of Economics. And you have quite an extensive career, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
I have quite an extraordinary background. They needed to. It's funny because I was amazed that, I guess you're reading off Wikipedia, that Wikipedia, somebody tried to correct the record by saying Susan's none of the things that they've made up her out to be. She's an honor student. She was in plays in high school. I mean, that is kind of funny. Somebody sweet tried to help me out, and it is an amazing story of how the government. I actually am a huge supporter of President Trump because what they have done to him with the Christopher Steele dossier is exactly like what they did to me. And I was subjected to I was actually subjected to felony perjury and forged documents that were created by Ahmed Chalabi's crew. I had been an outspoken opponent of sanctions and the war in Iraq, and I had gone to Colin Powell twice before his big speech at the United Nations, insisting that the Iraqi exiles were fabricating intelligence reports. Well, Colin Powell and John McCain decided they would cover up the real facts of Iraqi pre-war intelligence. I had been a CIA asset and defense intelligence asset for many, many years, going back to 93, 94. And so I had been involved in anti-terrorism covering Iraq and Libya. And almost none of the real story of my life comes out in the Wikipedia. So it's a funny thing to listen to to have Wikipedia put in these stories about me and then try to edit them out and say, look, this is false. And they're like, no, you can't say it's false. And it's like, but it is false. It's totally.
Well, one thing, if I read a bio and I kind of get some of this information from Wikipedia, I know it's prone to many mistakes. You know, I'd had Bill Binney on a different podcast and it needed some corrections as well. So I understand how Wikipedia can be. It's not the best source of information.
Wikipedia it's not your fault because you're reading from Wikipedia and it's just, I noticed that the very sweet somebody from high school apparently got on this week. Again, somebody from high school who hasn't seen me in 40 years. I'm like, I hate to tell you how old I am. 40 years ago, they're like, no, what are you saying about this woman? This is wrong. And they have more authority to write about me on the Wikipedia page about Susan Lindauer than I do. And
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I actually had to have Wikipedia had the wrong birthday, and they had somebody was going into the Wikipedia and editing the profile about me, and they didn't know who I was, and so they were putting in all these wrong facts, wrong details, and we were like, you know, this whoever's doing this does not even know Susan's birthday. And so I was very frustrated. I kept trying to fix it. And whoever it was going in, it was being notified, because Wikipedia lets you apparently get notified anytime there's if you have a profile that you're interested in, you can ask to be notified if it's changed. So here is a stranger who doesn't know me at all, who has clearly never met me before. But they had gone in and they kept putting in the wrong birthday. And I kept saying, that is not my birthday. So I literally had to have an attorney contact Wikipedia. And Wikipedia said, well, we want to see your birth certificate. He's like, you've got to be kidding me. No, you have to have a birth. This other person who's never met you before has more trustworthy, more credibility than Susan Lindauer herself. We demand a birth certificate. So we gave him a birth certificate. They're like, oh, I guess she does know when she was born. I'm serious.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I know this Wikipedia is an issue, and that kind of needs a little disclosure, and somehow that's got to get righted. So we need to definitely work on that.
10 years we've been trying, and at least they're now admitting that I've been on television and I've been on radio. And
I know. I've seen you on YouTube. I was watching all your interviews. You have some amazing interviews. You have articles in the New York Times, and the list goes on and on and on.
Fake news. I honestly, all the things that have been happening to President Trump, right down to the fake story about psychological, unfit to stand trial, total garbage. But because of what I knew and because of what I had done, I was considered, they had to discredit me.
That's what they do. Very familiar. They come up with whatever they can, basically, to these false things that they do. Yeah.
Pure make believe. In my letters to Colin Powell and Andrew Card was the chief of staff to George Bush, who whispered to leaned in on 9/11 and whispered into the president's ear that a second airplane had struck the World Trade Center. That was my cousin, the chief of staff to George Bush. So they had power over beyond what I had, and they were determined to protect the lie that we did know about 9/11, and I had negotiated the return of the weapons inspectors to Iraq, and I had also negotiated the Lockerbie trial with Libya, and so I was actually somebody who had a lot of credibility. All of my intelligence reporting was accurate, and right after I came home from prison, the Senate I guess it was the Senate Intelligence Committee. It was Republican Senator from Virginia, Warner, not the current Warner, but not the current Warners, but the older man who had been head of the Intelligence Committee, or maybe the Foreign Relations Committee, for many, many years. They actually, and Ron Wyden, who had been my boss, they, without acknowledging who I was, they said that they had looked at the intelligence from January of 2003 specifically, and that was the period that I was arrested for. And then they cited all the things that I had said, all the warnings that I gave them, and Senator Warner said, "This is chilling and prophetic. This is one of the only bright spots in all of Iraqi pre-war intelligence." And of course, wouldn't you know, then all these intelligence people said, we said that too. And it was like, no, I said it. And because I said it, I got sent to prison.
Unbelievable. Well,
Yeah.
would you mind, Susan? I want to go way back because this is a tribute to you. I really want to hear your life story. We have a couple hours, and again, this is my tribute to you. So, do you mind if we go back? I'd like to hear about, how politics came about for you, your interest in politics, and as I mentioned, I know your father was a newspaper publisher, and so maybe that was part of it, and a former Republican nominee.
Actually, it was my. This is one of the mistakes, this tiny mistakes in Wikipedia. It was actually my mother who was the newspaper publisher. She had 10 weekly newspapers in Alaska, and and 5 radio stations and a radio news network. She had the newspapers all along the coast. And Point Barrow, she had the newspaper for the whole North Slope. There was one newspaper, and it was hers. And then she had Kenai, Seward, the Dutch Harbor, the Eastern Aleutian Islands. These were tiny little newspapers, but they were very powerful because they could talk to Senator Stevens and Senator Murkowski and Don Young. And I came to Washington after I graduated from the London School of Economics with a master's degree in public policy and an undergraduate degree from Smith College, which I loved. I loved Smith in economics. And I came here and I had a bright future, and I was my mother's. First, I started off at U.S. News and World Report, which was very boring and tedious and dead. It was about to close down. It's like Time magazine today. There's nothing in Time magazine. It's like a has-been rag, or Newsweek today, has-been rag. But so I went from there, and I decided, I want to do something interesting. So I became the Capitol Hill correspondent for my mother's newspapers, covering environmental policy, land use, fisheries. We did the Marine Mammal Protection Act. My mother was a big Republican, but she was actually a power broker. She talked to Senator Stevens all the time and told him what she wanted him to do. She said, "I've got to call with Senator Stevens." And she, and all this stuff. And she was even from Alaska. My mother was a really sharp, wonderful woman who did really cool things. She had
a big impact on you. She really shaped your future.
She did. She had a wonderful impact on me. She was if you think about her being way ahead of her time, she was in Alaska, no less. If you got to realize she was in Alaska. So this is that's a different kind of world right there. She was a pioneering woman, and she was the president of the Anchorage Fine Arts Museum. And if you think of Alaska as not having any culture or any art, she was also president of the World Affairs Council, and she brought speakers from all over the world to come, and everybody wanted to come to Alaska, and they'd pay. Alaska had a lot of money at that point, so the World Affairs Council would pay for these big junkets for these guys to come, from whether they were even from the Washington Post or I got to meet the president of Egypt, in President Hosni Mubarak, and they'd have people would come into town, and then they'd go on a fishing trip in Alaska. They'd go on a whitewater rafting trip in Alaska. They'd go up to they'd entertain them. They'd get to see the real Alaska. It was actually really a cool thing. So it was like a great opportunity. But as a result of that, I had unnatural access to, even though I was growing up in Alaska, unnatural access to very big people who were governmental figures. Because my mother would bring them into the state and give them tours of the state, and she put them up in hotels, and they'd have receptions at my house, and my mother would arrange things for them. So it was actually, she was a really cool lady. My father was a jerk. He really was. He is still alive, but he was not a nice man. But my mother was a wonderful woman.
Yeah, I see. Well, whatever happened, it kind of shaped who you are, and and a lot of people have respect for you. And what you did is incredible. What you were able to accomplish, although I know that you had to suffer, retaliation for your disclosures, but whatever it is, it worked out for you. And
well, retaliation is the word because no good deed goes unpunished. And it's so easy for people who don't like what I think or what I say. I know that I'll never be invited to I'm a huge Trump supporter. Huge, huge, huge. One of probably the most loyal Trump supporters out there. But I'll never get invited to the White House. I'll never get that card from the president. I'll never get the phone call, though I should get the phone call for all the things that I try to do. I will never get it because of what they did to me. And in fact, what they're doing to me, what they did to me, is exactly what they're doing to Trump. And I would like everyone to listen to this interview. And as you're listening to it, think about the Trump dossier, that awful, salacious, bogus, disreputable dossier, and realize that it is a forgery. It is falsified testimonials. It is my strongest opinion, my most passionate opinion, that Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson should be indicted for felony perjury and gross. They went after Mike Flynn for making a quote a single false statement because when he had an interview with the FBI, he remembered something differently. And that happens in a conversation. It's like, well, I think I said this. And they said, oh, you used this different word. He said, did I use that different word? I don't think I used that word. And then this stroke guy pulled out, had a tape recording of it. And he said, oh, you see, right here's the interview. And it turns out you did use that word. You lied to me. I didn't lie to you. This was, I don't remember the exact word that I used. But this is what the FBI does, and it's very, very, very dangerous because most of the time the FBI does not record meetings, interviews with people. They rely on memory, and then they say, well, and you're relying on your memory, and you're like, well, I don't think that's what I said to you. I think I said this. Or you try to clarify whatever you said before. Oh, if you think that I said that, well, I meant to say this. And if they want to, right there, they can say, that's a false statement because you told me something else before. And it's like, did I really say that? Or are you just not remembering it right? Oh, well, I'm the FBI. I must be right. And then they prosecute you for it. And there's no malicious intent. But on this, you see, so it's very easy for the FBI to screw people with this, making false statements because you may have a discrepancy in what like the FBI says you said it was blue and you said, well, actually I think it was, purple. I don't think that's what I said. Or you said it was red, but really it was pink. And it's like, it's stupid, but that's enough to get you. It really is. And it's really, it sounds so stupid. It sounds totally stupid until it happens to you. And then you're like, they can't do this. They can't. No, you can't send me to prison for saying something's pink if it's red. And, my idea of what is pink and your idea of what is red, it may be very different things. And stop. This is not a deliberate lie.
So there's the memory. And there's also misinterpretation. Sometimes people might perceive your words differently than you intended. And that's just part of life. And that's just part of communication.
Yes. That's right.
But if they're looking to come up with false information on you, they're going to do it regardless, even if their memory is a little better.
That's how they got Mike Flynn. That's how they got Mike Flynn, and it breaks my heart. And that's why I feel like I need to educate people about, if you ever have an interview with the FBI, take your own tape recorder. Take your own tape recorder and demand and say, this interview will not happen unless it's recorded. And I'm going to specify right now that I'm making the best statement that I have based on knowledge of the facts. And I have no desire to mislead you. I'm trying to be accurate. and I'm trying to remember the best I can whatever happened that you're asking me about. I'm going to try to answer these questions truthfully, and there's no intent not to answer them truthfully. And if but you can get, oh my goodness. But compare that to Christopher Steele. Now, this is my comparison really here, is that Mike Flynn getting hit with a prosecuted a criminal offense for making one count of false statements versus Christopher Steele, who deliberately lied, packed his dossier with wrongful information, grossly egregious errors, and he's not facing any prosecution at all. And he's not facing any prosecution. So it just shows that, what a witch hunt this is, how malevolent this is. This is a political abuse of power by Democrats who are trying to punish Trump for winning the election and trying to go after Trump's family. I am appalled. I think that it shows the Democrats in the worst possible light.
I'd have to say, I am a Democrat, but, I understand your point of view. And, with him, there's a lot of good he's doing, even, these trumped up charges on Trump or accusations on Trump, there's so much he's done good. And he's really shaken up those agencies. Those alphabet agencies are shaking in their boots. And that needs to happen, in my own opinion, in my experience, and all the discussions I've had with whistleblowers. That's what I had a little hope in him that he would accomplish, and he did. I was just ecstatic to hear that, because there needs to be a little oversight on, and he's looking to really, put people in there to see what's going on, and I approve of that immensely.
Yes, he really is draining the swamp, and he's shaking up Washington, and oh my, it needs it so badly. So but the whole thing about trying to pull him, demanding that he have a psychiatric evaluation, that they want to pull the 25th Amendment, that he's not mentally competent, and the Democrats look like lunatics. It is hysteria. It is crazy. They look like they're crazy. They need to be in a rubber room. They really do. It's just I would never vote Democrat again, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, I actually voted independent. And of course, that's kind of wasting my vote, but I just couldn't, and maybe I had a different perception, and I had other concerns about Trump because of all the news articles, but, I understand your point of view, and I didn't want Clinton necessarily to get into office just because she's so indoctrinated into Washington already, and there's just too much information out there,
she knows. Crook.
That's what everyone says.
Hillary is a major crook. Yes.
Yeah. And so, we'll just have to see how it goes, and I was kind of, secretly, cheering him on to some degree just because of what is actually happening, that he's shaking up Washington, D.C. And it's needed to happen.
He's shaking it up. The tax reform is already producing benefits. We have got to fire up our economy, and he's doing it. The jobs, and listen, Obama had 8 years and nothing happened. 8 years. And so now Obama, after a dead water presidency, all of a sudden things are going right, and Obama's now trying to take credit for that, but it's all Trump. It is the cutting regulations, it's the tax cuts, it's draining the swamp, it's pulling back the government off the backs and off the necks of the American businesses and the people. Look at what happened with the Bundy situation. Where
that's right over here in my neck of the woods. I was very involved with that, actually, on some levels.
Yeah. I mean, Hillary Clinton stole, and Obama, they stole the ranchers' lands in Oregon and Nevada and Arizona so that they could give the uranium rights and mineral rights to Russia and other places. And Hillary took $145 million in stock from the Rosatom Corporation. And we all know about this. And now it's turned out that the Bundys, I mean, my God, what that poor man has gone through. You know, being in prison on I don't think they let him go free. I think they've been holding him. Every time he's acquitted, they transfer him to a different state and say, well, we're going to put you on trial again. And the judges have said, no, this is over. This is dismissed with prejudice. You cannot refile this. It's done. And it is a huge victory. But it was all because one man tried to stand up to the man and stood up to Obama and Hillary, and they were out to profiteer. And this is what happens. And what they did to me is the scariest thing. For those of you who don't know, I was the second I was the CIA asset covering Iraq and Libya at the United Nations.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I want you to finish your thought, because I really do want to get into your interest in the Middle East and your passion. And I've heard so much and listened to, and read some of your interviews, the New York Times articles. And
it's horrible. When you're done, the New York Times is awful.
Well, we know it's very liberal.
No, it was grossly dishonest. I was like, what the heck? Talk about fake news. There was not a single word in that article that was true. The New York Times, David Samuelson. I wept when I saw that. I was like, who is he talking about? There was not a single word in it that was accurate. And what was amazing was, and this was a brave thing for the CIA and Defense Intelligence Agency to do, they tried to claim me. And it was like, oh, the New York Times, we're thinking, oh, yeah, my CIA handlers spoke with them. My defense intelligence handlers spoke with them. Think about this. Both the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency told the New York Times that I gave advance warning about 9/11. And this is the New York Times, and they serve the city where the World Trade Center was. And they received, this should have been, a cover magazine story. They put it in New York Magazine, and it was just this hideous high school, juvenile, amateurish article. And please do not read it. It was I cried. I literally wept when I read it. But they had come out and they said, yes, Susan warned about 9/11. Well, that should have been news. That should have been, the CIA confirms that Susan Lindauer knew about 9/11 in April and May of 2001. And
but
they tell the New York Times.
I thought there was a retraction.
What? No. No. You're getting confused. They told them, and the New York Times never printed it. The New York Times is so back in realize. No, we're talking September 2001. Okay, right? September 11th, 2001. I am arrested in March of 2004. In April or May of 2004, immediately the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency admit to the New York Times that I gave advance warning about 9/11. They admitted it. And the New York Times ignores it, erases it, tries to erase it. And it's not until 2008, after June of 2008, that I finally am allowed a hearing in New York. I've already gone to prison. I spent a year in prison on the Patriot Act. Let me finish. Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you. I spent a year in prison on the Patriot Act, and no right to a trial, no right to a hearing. I kept saying, Your Honor, I have witnesses who will prove this stuff. You don't have to take my word for it. I had attorneys from the Lockerbie trial and journalists calling the prison telling them, Susan's telling you the truth. They weren't just sitting home waiting for the prison to call them. And, they weren't just waiting. They were aggressively saying, no, you got this wrong. You've got this thing totally wrong. And I was in June of 2008, I was finally allowed one hearing. So I'd already been released from prison a year and a half before. Okay, so I'm arrested in March of 2004. Richard Fuse and Paul Hoven confirmed the 9/11 warnings by April and May of 2004. 4 years go by, and I finally am allowed a hearing. I have a former chief of staff for Congressman Andrew Forbes testifies and says, yeah, Susan had a long relationship with Paul Hoven, and he's a spook, and all the things they did were spooky. And as a chief of staff, I was able to confirm everything Susan said. Everything Susan was saying, Paul Hoven was saying, it's all true. Okay. And Park Godfrey, who was a professor at York University in Toronto, he also testified in court at the same hearing, and I was only allowed 2 witnesses. And one was a chief of staff, one was a computer science professor who'd known me for 15 years. They said, the story about this insanity is garbage. What the bloody heck are you doing? This is frightening. You don't know what you're saying about Susan Lindauer. It is completely a lie. And oh, by the way, she was an asset. We know this. And she did warn about 9/11. So finally, in June of 2008, 4 years after my CIA and defense intelligence handlers confirmed the 9/11 warnings to the New York Times, 4 years later, there is testimony in Manhattan, in the Southern District of New York, in front, and the New York Times is there at the hearing, and the New York Times does not print it again, and the New York Times instead says Susan Lindauer is suffering from nonstop hallucinations. She believes in God and she speaks about religion all the time, and she cannot stop speaking about religion. And I'm like, pardon me, what? I mean, I could use some pretty strong obscenities right at this point, because I do believe in God. I totally believe in God, but that is ridiculously stupid. I mean, I talk the way I talk, and I defy anybody to say that I do believe in God. I do. But
you're very authentic for being in politics, listening to you, like I said in some of your other interviews, you're authentic. You're you, and you don't pretend to be anybody else, and you stay true to your word, and you just sounds like you speak what you really believe.
Yeah, that's right. And also I'm very private about things like religion. And I would never discuss religion with a psychology major. I despise psychology. And so I consider that psychology is a pseudoscience, quackery, and fraud. It is, I despise it. There is nothing that I despise more than psychology.
Oh, I've got a whole group that is right on that page with you. I've had shows about that.
Yeah, and it is just frightening what these people, they're so selfish and grandiose. They are not participatory witnesses. They are conformists who desperately want to keep everyone inside the box.
And they're a business, and sorry to interject, and I don't mean to step on you. They're a business that is they're basing opinions without any evidence.
There you go. It is a business. That is the best word for it. It is a profit-motivated business, and they've got their hooks into the courts. And when I was locked up in Carswell, people would pull out their psych evaluations, and we'd hand them around the room, and then they'd say, "Oh, look what they said," and then somebody would read something, and we would try to guess which of us they were talking about, and we'd be like, who are they talking about? Well, that couldn't be any of us. And be like, oh, well, it's about you, or it's about you. And we'd laugh. I mean, it was sick. It was really sick. It was really aggravating. It was so terrible. It was black humor. It was just so
dark comedy.
So really dark. But I learned how to laugh in prison. I really did. My favorite memory was not my favorite memory, but one time I was playing Monopoly and I got a get out of jail free card. And I took it to the prison guard and said, I want to go home. The Monopoly game says I get to go home. I want to go home right now.
It probably helped save you. Yeah, that mindset probably saved you. You know, I find humor in things too, and it's healthy. It keeps you sane.
Yeah, it really was. But we had a lot of tears too. It's a frightening thing when the government, it's a terrifying thing when the government has no evidence to convict you of a crime. Now realize the garbage from Ahmed Chalabi was disproved within a week, and it was immediate. As soon as I got I'll give you an example, a frightening example of how bad this was. Ahmed Chalabi had made his people had made a few forgeries in my handwriting, and we always used to, if you're doing spooky stuff, you know that this happens and it doesn't bother you. Okay, until they lock you in prison, it's not going to bother you because, they're making up stories and they're trying to feed you bad intelligence, and so you laugh at it. You really do. You're like, oh, brother, you're dumb. But Ahmed Chalabi was always making things up. When I first got to, one of the reasons the Iraqi diplomats at the United Nations were willing to speak to me was that Ahmed Chalabi's people helped me out by sending a series of letters in my handwriting to the Iraqi embassy in New York. And it said that I was pregnant with an Iraqi diplomat's child, and it sent a photograph of a bed, and it said, "This is the bed." This is like the Arabs; they're nuts. This is the bed where this event took place, and now I'm pregnant, and I want to get money out of the Oil for Food program as child support. So how do I get money from the Oil for Food program? And they actually called me up and they said, Susan, what are you talking? What is going on here? And I said, and they made me write out a letter in handwriting and give it to them so they could compare the two handwritings, and that it matched perfectly. It looked exactly like my handwriting, except it was totally bizarre.
Right.
And it totally bizarre. And talking about Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon and I'm pregnant. And maybe I'll name my baby Nebuchadnezzar, something crazy like that. And so it really does happen. The Iraqi exiles were notorious for this kind of thing. And I knew this, so at first I wasn't upset. I was like, oh, well, we'll straighten this out fast. But here's what they did. They wrote out a couple of receipts in my handwriting. And the monies were very small. One was for $100, and two were for $150. That's what they had. Okay? Now, the deal was, though, because the devil is in the details. Just like I just said, I don't have a baby. I don't have a baby, so this is just ridiculous story. But the devil is in the details. So what had happened was they claimed that a specific diplomat gave me $100 and $150. And the beautiful thing was the diplomat left the country in March. And this was supposed to have been given to me in December. And it was in my handwriting, dated. And so I said, well, he wasn't even in the United States. He was not here. This diplomat had left the country. So if NORAD can track, and I actually argued this in court, and I stood up and I wouldn't shut up. I was like, Your Honor, if I actually said this, if NORAD can track Santa Claus, because they had moved me from Texas. I was still in prison, but they'd moved me from Texas to New York to MCC. I said, if NORAD can track Santa Claus coming from the North Pole, I defy you to explain how NORAD could not track a magic carpet coming over the Atlantic Ocean and landing in New York City. NORAD should have found that magic carpet because this man was not in the United States, and there's nothing you can do to change that. So how did he give me this money? You're talking $100. And I said, ooh, $100. And I was furious. I was scathing furious. And the judge and the prosecutor just looked at me with horror. And Judge Mukasey was he just looked at me like with his jaw open, and he was about to tell me to shut up and don't talk. But then he just put his, because they don't like this. This was an outburst in court, but I had been trying to speak. I said, Your Honor, this is crazy. I said, what's crazy is that you are indicting me. How did NORAD track Santa Claus and miss this magic carpet? Because this man left the United States. He was not in the United States. And realize I'm being shackled. As I'm saying this, I've got a bailiff coming towards me, putting shackles on my feet and putting handcuffs on my wrists to pull me out of the courtroom. And I said, how did they do it? He was not in the United States. How did he give me $100? I demand that you explain this. Your Honor, you must demand an explanation. How did I get $100 from a man who was not in the United States? And they're making it sound like, you look at Wikipedia. It makes it look like, oh my God, this is just, so big. This is such a big deal. She must have had financial transactions from Iraq. This is terrible. We're talking $100 here.
Right.
I mean, it's just, but I gotta say, I mean, I don't, what do you say? How do you, it's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's really unbelievable. And we have a break coming up.
And realize I'm in shackles while this is going on. Okay. I'm in a courtroom where I'm like in an orange jumpsuit when this is going on. This is not like millions of dollars. This is stupidity. This is absurdity. It's Kafkaesque.
Yeah, it's just traumatic, and I can understand how much it affected you. I do want to get into your book. I want to buy that book, and I'm going to get into it. I really want to see. I can understand how traumatic it was. And I was going to say, we have a break in a couple minutes, and we get back. I know this is something we need to talk about as well, but you accomplished so much, though, what you did in the Middle East, and I want people to hear that, and that's what people really respect you, is just everything you tried to accomplish, all the war that you tried to stop. That's what I want people to hear about.
Thank you very much. I would be very honored to talk about that, and to talk about the very frightening things of what it was like to be in prison. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I still think we have another minute. Hopefully, usually I can hear the break. We'll see if that happens. Like I said, we have another minute. So, there we go. We'll be back after this break, everyone.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, "You can't handle the truth." Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com. Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Hyla Cass, MD, Melanie Richton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous. It is. Very dangerous. Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that, just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Ellen. I'm here with Susan Lindauer. If you're just catching this second half of the show, and she's one of the top whistleblowers of all time, and
thank you.
Well, that's what it shows online in many sites. So wanted to plug you that way because it seems to be a fact. So again, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about your incarceration, but again, I'd still love to hear about your passion for the Middle East and all your amazing accomplishments, and because I want people to know why you're considered that.
Well, I really appreciate that because, I'm about to cough.
Okay, anyways.
Sorry about that.
No problem. She's fighting a cold. She's back east with that 0 degree temperature, and everyone seems like a lot of people in Washington are sick. So
that's right. It's pretty rough. But I'll tell you something. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the opportunities for peace because I was a CIA and defense intelligence asset, and there was a demand for intensive secrecy, but we had a back channel to Iraq and Libya dating to 1995. I met my CIA handler in September of 94. I met my defense intelligence handler in 1993, and by 95, I was in the field dealing with Libya first and then Iraq. And I was working on the Lockerbie trial. My CIA handler had been in Lebanon during the Lockerbie event, and this was about CIA heroin trafficking. And they had their reasons for doing it, and I will tell you honestly why it happened, and you can decide whether that was a good reason or not. But I will leave that to you. But they were engaged in heroin trafficking with the group that is now called Hezbollah, what used to be called the Islamic Jihad. Okay? And it was Ahmed Jibril and Abu Talib and Mansour al-Qassar, who were the big names in Hezbollah, militant Hezbollah. And the Lockerbie bombing, the bombing of Pan Am 103, happened because the CIA, I will tell you how I know this from my CIA handler who was on the ground in Lebanon when all this was going on. And also, I got it take the other way from, I was the press secretary and speechwriter for Senator Carol Moseley Braun, and I went out to lunch one day, and as I crossed over across the Supreme Court, a man stepped out and said, "We understand you've been talking to Libya, and we want to tell you our side of the story." So I've got this from two different angles. But what happened was the CIA claimed that they were trying to penetrate the Islamic jihadists, and they were trying to find where the hostages were being held. 96 high-profile Western hostages, including Terry Waite and Terry Anderson and some professors at the American School in Beirut. All of the CNN bureau chief, the CIA station chief, had all been kidnapped. They were being brutalized. Literally, they were chained up, and not given, they had a bucket. I want you to think about this. Chained on a rope with a bucket to pee in. Okay, horrible situation. And this had gone on for years. So the CIA said, well, if we want to try to get close to Islamic Jihad, now Hezbollah, and we want to find out where these guys are holding these hostages because somebody's got to save them. Well, the problem was that the heroin was a huge moneymaker for the CIA. So every time they would get close, somebody was tipping off Hezbollah and Ahmed Jibril, and they'd narrow in on where these guys were being held, and then all of a sudden they'd be moved. And it was because there was somebody was a double agent exposing their positions. So in order to keep the profits going, this was Oliver North and Iran-Contra, Chip Tatum, who was, they were flying in. This was flying cocaine out of Latin America, turning it around to buy weapons for Iran. It was the whole Iran-Contra thing. So and so the Lockerbie bombing was part of that. So that was their side of it, was that they were trying to find out where these people were. And someone from the Defense Intelligence Agency got very upset and contacted Washington, D.C. and reported it to Langley. They said, we have a double agent here. This is garbage. Our operation is blown. We cannot supply heroin through Pan Am Airlines to Frankfurt and London and New York. This has got to stop. So the CIA and the FBI came out from Washington and they went to Beirut. They did their investigation. They were returning home with the team from the Defense Intelligence Agency. And it just so happened that everybody got on the plane Pan Am 103. And I will tell you, the Defense Intelligence guy tried to get on a different plane and was routed to Pan Am 103. So he tried to get on in Malta and tried to come in from a different angle entirely. But they they connected him in, and the next thing he knows, he's on the flight that he's been trying to avoid, so that they did not want everybody to be on the same plane. They thought it would be better if everybody was on different planes. But it was orchestrated that way. And British intelligence and the State Department had ordered American citizens to American citizens and high-ranking British diplomats who they liked. It was only the people they liked were told to get off the plane, Pan Am 103, and that freed up, I think, 20 seats for students from Syracuse University who were flying standby in London to get on the flight because everybody else had been told to get off. Okay, so the plane blows up over Scotland, and here we have 25 years later the same cover-up and the same nonsense story that Libya did it. Libya had nothing to do with it, but ironically, Libya did give sanctuary to Abu Nidal, who was part of the Lockerbie case. And so when Abu Nidal, who was an expert at airplane hijackings and airplane bombings, that was his modus operandi. When he went into hiding, he went to Libya. But the CIA ironically did not want Abu Nidal to come out because if Abu Nidal came out and told everybody the story about Lockerbie, the guy, let me just tell you, the guy who put the bomb on the plane lives 6 miles from my house in Northern Virginia, Fairfax County. Okay? 6 miles from where I am right now lives the man who put the bomb on the airplane. He's been in protective, visa access, visa custody, not custody. He's not in custody, but he is he's moving. He moves around. He just does whatever he wants to do, goes around town, but he's got total protection from the CIA because nobody wants this story coming out.
Wow. Unbelievable. Are
Yep.
you still?
Yeah. Can you imagine?
It's, a lot of this information that you're telling me, I have heard before from other people, so I believe every word you say.
Yeah, well, but part of the reason that they came after me on Iraq was that I helped to negotiate the Lockerbie trial, and they knew that I had been aggressive about pushing the envelope to get the story out about Libya and Lockerbie. And my response to that was that, well, once soldiers are in the field in Iraq, the military, I got to tell you guys, whether you like it or not, if you're a spy, if you're doing espionage, if you're, Bradley Manning, I cried when Bradley Manning was indicted. I really did. And I'm glad a lot of your listeners will be shocked that I say this. I'm glad that Bradley Manning was freed. But the truth of the matter is that the United States military has every right in the world to tell their assets, under no circumstances are you going to leak this information. Because once soldiers are in the field, they have every obligation. The first obligation is to protect the soldier's body, the soldier's reputation, the soldier's morale, to protect recruitment. And so during my indictment, the crazy thing was that they indicted me proactively. It was a preemptive strike because they knew that I was a whistleblower on Lockerbie. But Lockerbie, we were not at war with Libya. We did not have any soldiers in the field. And it would have been extremely good and necessary for the American people to know about 9/11 and the 9/11 warnings that we had. That was something that was legitimate for the public to know. But the part about Iraqi pre-war intelligence, where you have soldiers in the field, the military was ironically very good to me. They gave my boyfriend a job at the Pentagon and a 6-figure salary. He lived with me, and they knew he was living with me, and he still had, he got a top secret security clearance. And we were, except for the fact that I was under indictment as an enemy agent, but never espionage, but as an unregistered agent for the $100 that I did not get, because NORAD cannot track a magic carpet coming over the Atlantic Ocean the way they can track Santa Claus. It was crazy. It was just absolutely insane stupidity. But they were afraid of me because of what I had done on Lockerbie. They knew I was a whistleblower. And they knew that I would be, and that I wouldn't back down, because this was heroin trafficking and terrorism, and I was not, and I had proved that I would never be silenced. You see?
I see.
So the fact that I had the reputation going into this thing gave them a justification for a preemptive strike against me. Though I never acted as a spy, and they knew that. And I never took any money from the Iraqis, and they knew that too. In fact, if I had wanted to get any money from the Arabs, Libya was the one that had all the money. Seriously, if I had wanted money from any Arab, why would you go to the Iraqis? Libya has millions of dollars, and they could have put. If I had been seeking money from any government, Libya could have put money in a offshore account, but never. Unfortunately, they never did.
Wow. So I know at one point, because I know that you're an anti-war activist. It seems like to be that's the most important thing. So I know that you said there was they had an agreement. They were, when they were planning on going into Iraq, there was like a peace agreement or something. I'm paraphrasing what it is. Can you go into a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The tragedy of Iraq, and it was a heartbreaking tragedy, the war was completely avoidable and unnecessary. Iraq, we all know, had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. I had been involved with negotiations to resume the weapons inspections from the point of time when at the point of the election of George Bush and Al Gore, while they were counting votes in Florida and counting those hanging chads in Florida, I was having meetings with the Iraqi ambassador. So we did not know who was going to win the election, but the CIA had given permission to me and the Iraqis had asked for the talks, and the idea was that we were going to give a victory to whoever won the election, whether it was a Democrat or Republican. The Iraqis had already indicated that they were willing to have the weapons inspections resumed, and it was when Colin Powell gave his first speech to Congress, he said, "This will be a short conversation because we just want those weapons inspectors in there." And he already knew, because Iraq had already agreed and offered that the weapons inspectors could come back. And so the Iraqis were like, "Come on in." And of course, George Bush immediately began to obfuscate and prevaricate as to why they would not send them in. But by February of 2001, the Iraqis had added an important codicil. They said that they would allow the FBI to send a terrorism task force into Baghdad with authorization to conduct investigations, interview witnesses, and make arrests. They were not so keen on the arrest parts of it. They said, what if we don't want to, what if there are, they were a little bit hedgy on the arrests, but they were going to provide access to the FBI to interview witnesses in terrorism cases. And Iraq had the best intelligence on terrorism in the Middle East, and they were always going after these jihadists. They were deeply threatened by the fundamentalists and fundamentalist Islam, and how those people would try to undercut the stability and the central authority of Saddam's government under sanctions, given the poverty of the people. And so they were very afraid of these people. They were quite willing for us to get them out of the country. But Iraq had already agreed to let the FBI come in. So in April and May of 2001, when I first told the Iraqi diplomats about 9/11, what was going to be called 9/11, about airplane hijackings and a strike on the World Trade Center as a known target, the Iraqis' response was, "Wow, if you think there's going to be a terrorist attack, go ahead. We've already agreed for you to send in the FBI. Tell them to come on in." And the diplomat was saying, I'll have I will personally handle the visas, and I will tell the other diplomats and the ambassador that I am to be interrupted in any meeting, anytime, so that I can, if the FBI shows up here, I will immediately respond, and I will jump in a taxi, the first taxi I can get. I'll come across town, and I'll be here in 15 or 20 minutes, and everything will be fine. and I'll guarantee their visas right off the top. See what I mean? This is a totally different picture. This is before 9/11 even happens. Okay? So after 9/11, all through the summer of 2001, the Iraqis were making great concessions to the CIA. The CIA was piling on all the demands that America, Washington wanted from Iraq. They wanted preferential, not only weapons inspections with no conditions. They wanted the FBI. They wanted preferential contracts for U.S. companies after sanctions. And they were adamant. They were so worried. They wanted oil contracts. Iraq agreed that United States, U.S. corporations could rebuild the oil pipelines and the oil pumping platforms and the whole pumping stations, because Iraq's oil infrastructure had been decimated by the sanctions. It was corroded with rust from low levels of use. The pipelines were in very poor condition. So Iraq was like, look, we'll use all American companies to rebuild our pipelines. And they had already allotted some oil fields to Russia. The Lukoil contract had been awarded to Russia. There was South Korea had some oil contracts. France had some oil contracts, because these countries had been longtime friends of the United States. But they said, or friends of Baghdad, but they said, we will give you oil contracts as well, and you're welcome to have second and third tier oil contracts from Russia, from all these other countries, plus your own contracts. So you can have everything. You can participate at a full level. And also they offered preferential contracts for rebuilding agriculture, transportation. The Iraqis offered to purchase 1 million American manufactured automobiles every year for 10 years. There would have been no bailout in Detroit. They offered to give preferential contracts to the U.S. on health care, hospital equipment, and pharmaceuticals, which would have been a huge bonanza. You got to realize we don't make very much anymore. We make farm equipment. They offered to buy a lot of Caterpillar equipment for the farming. But they were willing to give us anything we wanted, anything at all. There was even talk that Saddam Hussein would retire to a villa in Tikrit, and he suggested that he should have one squad of Iraqi Republican Guard, and he compared that to the Secret Service protecting President Clinton. And he said, your presidents have a Secret Service detail. I will have a Republican Guard, and I'll just go off and live my life alone and be left alone. And so he was willing to step down and move aside, but he wasn't going to be dead. He was a survivor, and he was an old man. And what he said was that it was proposed that the Iraqi exiles could now realize. Think of what I'm saying to you. This is known to the government by December of 2001. Throughout 2001, from February of 2001 all the way through December. By December, it's all crystallized. So the war starts in March of 2003. By December of 2001, all of this is possible. It's a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. But Iraq was willing to allow the exiles to return to the country and live in expanded embassy compounds. Okay, so they would have embassy compounds are considered sovereign territories of the home country. Like Britain cannot raid the Ecuadorian embassy to grab Julian Assange. No matter if they don't like him being there, they cannot go in there and take him. And neither could Saddam's people violate international law and go into the German embassy in Baghdad, or the French embassy, or the Russian embassy, or the U.S. embassy. and take out anybody that they didn't like. So this was actually, and then he said, you can come back, you can live at the embassies and travel around the country giving speeches. You can have opposition newspapers, opposition TV station, TV programs. You can campaign, give speeches. Saddam will not be there. And I actually speculated Saddam was going to die, because I was like, Saddam would not be there? What scenario would that ever happen? They said, oh, no, he might not be around. He said, you could do that. We can have these people come back and he'll retire. He'll retire to Tikrit. So this whole war never had to happen. It was completely, totally avoidable, and everybody knew it. Now you have a problem because the war, a year later, so March of 2003 comes around, Colin, twice before his big speech at the United Nations. Colin Powell is a villain in my world. He is evil and selfish and malicious. Twice before his big speech at the United Nations, I went to him. He lived next door to my CIA handler, Dr. Richard Fuse. And I took him papers. I took them to his wife, Alma. And I knocked on his door and hand-delivered papers to Alma and Alma Powell, his wife. And the Secret Service I turned around and the Secret Service was right behind me. I did this twice. And I made sure that he knew about the peace option. I said, I want to make sure you know about this. And one of the, in January 27th, 1 week before his speech at the United Nations, I challenged him. I said, please, this is totally respectful. Please do not get angry, but I have to tell you, the Iraqi exiles are notorious liars. They are famous for falsifying reports, because I'd been through so much. Famous for their forgeries. I was speaking for, I knew exactly what I was talking about. I said, you cannot trust these people. They have no support in Baghdad. They have no one. In order to go back to Iraq, they require U.S. soldiers to put guns to the heads of the Iraqi people, and otherwise they will be shot in the street because they're so deeply hated. And they know this. They know there will be no roses when they go home, if they go home. No roses and candy when they go home. So I told Colin Powell this, that they were making up intelligence. Well, he gave his speech anyway. But in September 8th, everybody can look this up, September 8th, 2005, fast forward to my arrest, Colin Powell gave an interview with Barbara Walters for 2020. It was a notorious interview whereby he complained that nobody mid-level at the CIA warned him the Iraqi exiles were fabricating intelligence reports. He said, mid-level people should have warned me. It was devastating to me that they did not tell me. They did not speak up and try to correct the mistakes in the assumptions. Well, the problem was I did. And he had turned it over to the FBI. And John McCain, this is parallel to President Trump at so many levels. It breaks my heart. That's why one of the reasons I feel so protective of this man. I'm so angry for what they're doing to him, because it's like a roadmap for exactly what they did to me. And it's scary stuff. Even Robert Mueller was involved in attacking me on the Patriot Act. But sure enough, September 8th, 2005, Colin Powell gives that interview. September 17th, 9 days later, the Justice Department rubber stamps an order that I am, quote, not competent to stand trial. On September 23rd, I am summoned into court where I have no idea what's going to happen. I am ambushed. Now, I had not been in court I was arrested in March of 2003. I had been ordered to keep my mouth shut and it would go away. And so in September, from March 2004 until September 2005, I have no court hearings, not a single court meeting. And 9 days after Colin Powell gives his speech, I'm summoned into court. And Barbara Walters does that horrible interview. 9 days later, I'm summoned to court, and they say, oh, you are not competent to stand trial. You are not going to have the right to a trial by jury, or you can't even plead guilty. The only way that you would be considered competent is if you do agree to plead guilty. Then we would know that you are cured if you agree to plead guilty. But otherwise, your not guilty verdict is rendered irrelevant. And then Judge Mukasey, who was hearing the 9/11 case by Larry Silverstein at that point, Judge Mukasey said that I would have 10 days to get my affairs in order before I would be forced to surrender to prison on October 3rd. So between September 8th to September 17th, September 23rd, and now I'm in prison on October 3rd. And it's like, wham, bam, thank you, man, done, done, done. When they wanted to move, they moved with lightning speed. And I was locked up on Carswell Air Force Base as an accused Iraqi agent. So nobody knew what I had really done or not done. They didn't know. They knew that they were at war, and at this point, we were losing the war badly. Now the Pentagon was terrified, but they knew. But they kept saying, I kept hearing from my boyfriend Jay Fields that they were appalled. They were really upset for me. They kept sending messages to me through him saying, "Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. We oppose this. We don't want this to happen to you." They kept apologizing is not the right word, denying responsibility for it. Just absolutely saying, we want nothing to do with this. We are not the source of this attack. Because I had been good. I got the message that they needed. They gave Jay Fields a job, and they sent him home with messages to me all the time saying, "Oh, Susan, this is terrible. We hate what the FBI is doing to you. Things are so bad in Iraq. It is much worse than the media is telling everybody. We're hiding a lot of stuff." And it's just, they're scared. Everybody's scared of you because of Lockerbie. And that's why I gave you the preface on what I had done in Lockerbie and how I was so aggressive in outing the CIA on heroin trafficking and why they were so afraid of me. Because I gave them good reason to be afraid of me, but not because I was going to blow up the war and the soldiers, because once they're in the battlefield, the military has every right. It has an obligation to protect those people. Even if you don't like the war, it is no longer relevant. I mean, I have to add that. Do you know what I mean? It's so unfair, but it is completely unfair. They never should have arrested me. They never should have put me in prison. But the military had the right to demand secrecy. I have to be honest with you. They really do have that right. It's not something civilians understand, but if you can't handle it, you should know, then you're in the wrong business.
Unbelievable.
So that's a long story.
Well, I do have a couple of questions. I wanted to know.
Please.
Okay. Is there anything that you have kind of gained out of this horrible experience that might be considered positive?
Well, actually, I think that I'm much stronger than I ever imagined I was. I can fight through things that are so difficult for most people, and I stay focused on my goals. I actually love my life. Wikipedia. I hope I was a little bit sharp and snarky when you talked about Wikipedia, but it's not you. I really hate Wikipedia. I hate fake news. These people are dishonest and stupid. They're just stupid, and they try to pretend they're knowledgeable and empowered, but really what they are is they have the right cheekbones. They've got tiny little, if you see these people in person, they're tiny, tiny little people. They're like dwarfs. Like Bill Maher is only like 5 feet tall, and he's skinny. I've never met Bill Maher, but he's skinny. He's got. I've met people who have spoken with him, who've been on his show, and he's a tiny, tiny little man. That is not good enough to hold me in prison and to say that you're an authority because you have tiny cheekbones and you're petite. That's dumb. These people who are trying to be our talking heads, they look pretty and they're stupid. They're just stupid. And so for those kinds of people to come and attack me really makes me angry.
Just ill-informed, haven't done the research, haven't talked to enough people and get an unbiased opinion.
Well, it's just it's how can they even pretend to know what happened if they don't know my story? I mean, Michael Isakoff wrote a book talking about he got to the bottom of the whole thing, and I said he didn't interview me, he doesn't know a damn thing. And they were like, oh, but he's Michael Isakoff. And it's like, oh no, he's an idiot. But I'm very harsh like that. So I'm very harsh about stuff like that.
It makes sense. Whenever someone's been violated, I mean, it's just a normal response. You're angry. I hear, other people respond the same way. It's just obviously what you've experienced wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for all, this disinformation, misinformation, and these irresponsible people reporting on you.
Yeah, that's right. And I sympathize so deeply with President Trump because exactly it's what they did to me is the blueprint for exactly what they're doing with him. The whole point about using foreign intelligence to go after the White House and to go after me anytime that the this is a red flag. In fact, I contacted President Trump back in March, and I said, look, this is a red flag that they're using foreign intelligence to come after you, because the CIA could never get away with this. And when they want to they outsource to foreign intelligence when they want to have something that's dicey and dirty and salacious and not fact-checked. And that's what they did. But I think that our relationship with MI6 and British intelligence needs to be severely confined now, because when you have the British government attacking the President of the United States, that is an outrage. I mean, really and truly, Theresa May should fall on her sword. The Queen Elizabeth should have got down on her knees and said, should have invited. No, I mean it. Today, President Trump said he was canceling his trip to Britain to inaugurate the new U.S. Embassy in London. And Queen Elizabeth herself should have telephoned Trump, and she should have said, I want you to know that we are appalled by what the scandalous failed spy Christopher Steele has done to you, and we profoundly apologize. I want you to come have tea at the Buckingham Palace, and if I were Queen Elizabeth, I'd make I'd make that woman pour my tea. I'd say, you pour the darn tea. You pour it. You be my servant today, because what they did was so terrible. And what's happened instead is British intelligence is, oh, how dare you accuse us? Whoa, lady. Whoa, stop. And I think they've damaged our relationship beyond where the United States can get it back, or where Britain can get it back.
Right. Yeah, I've heard some information about that. There's so much news that doesn't make it to the mainstream media. It's all controlled. Who do you think is in charge of the media?
Oh, well, I mean, the CIA, and again, I think there was this delusional fantasy that somehow that Trump was going to go away. That they thought that, remember they said, oh, they were going to impeach Trump. Oh, he would resign. Oh, he would go, he won't like the White House, so he'll go away and Mike Pence will be president. We're going to have Mike Pence as president. Just in a couple of months, Trump will be gone. I think that the stupidity is they really believed it. I think that they really thought that Trump, for a minute, for one crucial minute, they thought that they actually believed their delusion. And they were convinced of this delusion. And then Nancy Pelosi's like, even Nancy Pelosi, guys, there's not going to be an impeachment. Dianne Feinstein, no, not happening. And then now we see that President Trump is becoming a great president. He really is, I think, a great president. I love his direct talk and his salty language and his tough guy. He's a New Yorker, for heaven's sakes. He's got a personality. He's honest. I think he says what he really believes. Whether you like it or not, it's authentic. I love that. I trust Trump is not scripted, as we all know. And that's the best part of Trump. He is not a scripted president. He's telling you he's working 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for really good things to happen for American people. And if I were a Black American and I came out of today there was a meeting with Martin Luther King's nephew at the White House. And the guy came out and said, this guy is not a racist. He is not a racist. And he's not. He really deeply wants opportunities for all Americans. He does not want foreigners coming into our country. But that's okay. He really doesn't. And I'm glad for that. He wants to rebuild America and focus on the economy, jobs, taxes, infrastructure, energy policy, all the things that have got to, listen, people, have got to be done in order for the United States to re-emerge as a competitive power. We are in decline because we have ignored manufacturing until President Trump. We're in decline because Obama did not invest in vocational training for workers and labor, which Trump is now doing. We're in decline because our tax policy was the highest in the industrial world until Trump. So this is radical, rapid transformation. It's deep. It's not just cosmetic stuff. He's really getting stuff done. He's done a lot of Obamacare repeal stuff that will stand, like repealing the individual mandate, which is now removed by legislation. But he's also done an executive order allowing businesses to form associations across state lines and allowing insurance to be sold across state lines, which will help drive down the costs. And so even if he couldn't get the legislation through, the stupid Congress, because of stupid Mitch McConnell, he still went ahead and got an executive order for it. So things are, we're actually doing pretty well, I think. I mean, coming up on the first year of the Trump White House, I think he's done a pretty good job. I'm actually very pleased. I think it's fantastic that Walmart just increased their salaries from $9 minimum wages from $9 to $11. That's an extra $300 a month for full-time workers. $300 a month is a good deal. I mean, that's a healthy change. That means those people don't need food stamps anymore. That's a big deal. I'm excited about this. We're seeing that people are that the corporations are coming through and they're giving salary increases and it's not just Walmart, it's happening all over the place. So, I think that it was that this is all around positive, and it's also making American corporations reconsider leaving our country and bringing those money and the jobs back. So
that's a good point.
I'm very happy with what Trump is doing. I think from the standpoint of the economy, he's great. And the media is so terrible and vicious and cruel and sadistic to him. I mean, it's just the constant hate speech. Oh, I've lived through it. See, this is the thing. I lived through it when people say, "Oh, look at these, you're insane, you're crazy, you're a traitor." I have to live with this garbage lie that I was a traitor to America for the rest of my life. But I know that I wasn't.
Yeah,
but,
and that's what's matter. That's what matters.
I know it. I know, but I'll never work again. I can't get a job.
So you're blacklisted.
I'm blacklisted.
My next question happened to be, what actions are still be taken against you? How are you still being targeted by the government?
Well, it's interesting because I got involved. General Petraeus. And again, you got to realize the generals have been some of my greatest supporters. Okay? The military actually treated me very well because they understood. I was a defense intelligence asset. And once I explained that, once they were paying attention, once I said, look, this is a fake, it's a forgery. Ahmed Chalabi's people lie, fabricate this stuff. The guy was not in the United States. He could not have given me $100. See, check it out. And they did check it out. And they said, oh my God, that's true. That's absolutely true. So General Petraeus, before he left and realized how long ago this was, when he was head of the CIA briefly, and he gave me and a team of people the opportunity to recover stolen federal money. And again, I come into Hillary Clinton. Again, it's relevant to today. General Petraeus threw us a lifeline, threw me a bone, and we recovered $87 billion in stolen federal monies. And we had filed all the right paperwork. For whistleblower rewards, we filed it with the Treasury Department in February of 2015. February 3rd, 2015. Andrew McCabe, the FBI director, was overseeing the recovery of the stolen federal monies. He was informed about it, and I know that because I sent the stuff to the FBI and sent it to Comey and McCabe. So I know for a fact that Comey and McCabe had it. Okay, so in March of 2015, 1 month after I send this to these guys, and Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland helped me file the whistleblower rewards to the Inspector Generals and the Attorney General again of the Justice Department and we had already notified Eric Holder, but we also notified Loretta Lynch. I was not taking any chances. Everybody knew. So Loretta Lynch knew. She was brand new Attorney General at that point. She had just come in, and we'd already had Eric Holder before, and now we had Loretta Lynch. But the Inspector General of the Justice Department, the Treasury Department, the CIA, the Pentagon, the Director of Intelligence Services, and the Office of Special Counsel all were informed. They all got complete binders, over 1,000 pages, maybe 1,200, 1,300 pages of documentation. Okay, and we were wanted our money really badly. Well, Andrew McCabe had a conversation with a man by the name of Terry McAuliffe. And Andrew McCabe, who was gathering the money, who was part of overseeing the investigation, he was not doing it. He had underlings, FBI underlings doing it, but he was informed about it. He had a conversation with Terry McAuliffe in March of 2015. The money arrives October 2015. And I know that because Chip Tatum, everybody Google his name, Chip Tatum, if you don't know him, Operation Pegasus. He calls me on Skype. He's a friend of mine. And he calls me up and he says, hey, MacDill Air Base invited me to come down and sign documents saying that because money just came in from one of my old operations. And this was October 24th. And it was on Skype. It was recorded on Skype. I can prove that. October 24th. Well, Andrew McCabe's wife. Okay, so Chip Tatum tells me that $28 million is being paid to restart Pegasus, and he's getting 10% of the money. He said he was offered 20%, but he agreed to take 10%. And that tells me that there were that there were 5 people, because he was going to get 20%. Everybody was going to get 20% of that money, that $28 million. That tells me there were 4 other people. Now, if you look up what Pegasus was, it's a long defunct CIA dirty tricks operation made up of assassins. This is an assassin wet boy team. And then look at I don't no time to go into all the murders done by Hillary Clinton, the Seth Rich, all the deaths, Seth Rich, Sean Lucas, Arthur Ashe, all of the Hillary's doctors, father or something like that, all these people who died during the campaign. And you know that $28 million was spent by Hillary to reactivate Pegasus. It's a dirty tricks op. They were going to go after surveillance of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump so they could try to get an insurance policy. Ooh, insurance policy. Where have you heard this before? Against that they could use as leverage trying to control Donald Trump if he won the election, or if he won the nomination. They were going to try to force him out at the Republican convention so that they could give it to somebody else who they wanted, because they decided they already knew they didn't like him. So they wanted to get rid of him, and they wanted to put somebody else in. So they were already planning on how to get him. Well, this is the same time the $28 million I'm made aware of the $28 million on October 24th, 2015. Andrew McCabe's wife gets paid $450,000, broken out in 3 installments on October 1st, October 27th, and October 29th through Terry McAuliffe and Hillary Clinton. And everybody says, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton gave Terry McAuliffe the money, and it all came from our stolen federal monies. And I have given this information to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and I've given it to the committees. I gave it to them, to Sessions, back in July. Of course, Sessions didn't do a darn thing with it. So before Christmas in November, I gave it to Grassley and the the House and Senate Judiciary Committee. And we believe that when Andrew McCabe was behind closed doors for 8 hours, they were actually pumping him in part for information about this money.
We have just a couple more minutes, so I wanted to let you know that.
So I'm sorry, but I want you to know that this is.
Oh, I guess it's a little bit early.
Okay.
You're going to have to come back, and you know what? Pick up her book, guys, Extreme Prejudice, and check her out online and look up her YouTube. And again, Extreme Prejudice is the book, and come back next week. I have amazing whistleblowers coming on again. And thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Susan.
Thank you.